Hey everyone, this is Kona, and I'm going to talk you through the first part of our assignment for Project 2 and the Minitab stuff. So for the first part, you needed to do the tally for all of the variables, and if you weren't sure how to do that, that's just stat and tables, tally, and then you would just add all of the variables, so all of these, just you would select them, add them here, and do the counts and the percents. So that's what this is right here. Then every other comparison for the rest of this assignment, and that's including the first part and the last part where you do your own story, should have been done using stat, tables, cross tabulation, and chi-square. So for this one, I have method because I'm going to do all the methods, and then you would pick each one of the other variables here. Why are we doing this? Because it's all qualitative data, and this is really the best way to analyze qualitative data when you've got all of it like this. So for the first part, where you're doing your comparisons, it was method versus each one of these variables. You wanted the counts, the row percents, and the column percents. And so what you got was something that looked like this. So for this one, we're looking at the method. Maybe let me enlarge that a little bit. There we go. Okay, so we've got the method, which is face-to-face and online, compared to live gun. So that's whether someone owns a gun, lives in a household with a gun, but doesn't own one, or doesn't have a gun. So what you needed to do for this one was that you needed to, and this is where maybe it might not have made sense, and so that's why I'm going through this in the video, for each one. So take own gun, but what you're doing is you're comparing the face-to-face versus the online for this one. So what you're actually comparing is that 34.10% to the 37.4%. So what you're doing is looking at, for people who own guns, except it's not just people who own guns, you're actually comparing that method as well. So you're kind of comparing the method for each one of those. So even though you're only looking at the own gun, what you're really looking at is that comparison of face-to-face. So that's why you're looking at the 34.10 to the 37.40. Because what you want to know is overall, is there a difference in the method? So that's a really big thing. You're not comparing the people who own guns to live with guns to no guns. We don't care about that for this comparison. For this comparison, the only thing we're interested in is any difference for each of the answer options in terms of how the data was collected, so that method face-to-face. So for live guns, we'd be comparing the 21.51 and the 23.46, then the 44.39 and the 39.14. So what is this telling us, or what are we really looking at? We're looking at, for people who took this survey face-to-face, 34.10% indicated that they owned a gun. For people who took this survey online, 37.4% indicated that they owned a gun. Now, is there a big difference between the two of those? Well, no, there's not really much of a difference. It's what, about around 3%, right? So that's not a huge difference. Well, that's what we want to see, is that there really isn't any difference between how people answered the survey, whether it was face-to-face versus online. If you see a big difference, then that's bad, because that's indicating that there was something about the modality, so something about that method of how the data was collected that potentially impacted how someone responded. So in this case, there doesn't seem to be a huge difference, so we would say, nope, no real difference, nothing seems to be going on there. So now for this one, where are you going to look? Well, you start with this yes column, so people who grew up with a gun. You would look at the 56.75 to the 59.92. So once again, not really much of a difference. Online does tend to be, it looks like, a little bit higher in this case, where if you look for the no's, it's a little bit, online's a little bit lower than face-to-face, but ultimately it's only about, here it's, let's see, well, you've got 59 to 56, so about 3% difference. And you've got about a 3% difference here. So not a huge difference. They're probably pretty close to being about the same. Method versus background check. So we've got 95.88 and 96.25. So extremely similar there. Then we've got 4.12 and 3.75. So once again, very similar there. So for that one, we seem to be good to go. Methods in concealed carry. So 73.46, 74.66, 26.54, and 25.34. So once again, those seem to be pretty similar. The 73 and the 74 are pretty close. That 26.54 and 25.34 are very similar. So far, it looks like there doesn't seem to be any kind of issue with whether or not we collected the data online or face-to-face. So the data seems to be similar regardless of where the data was collected, which is good. This is what we wanted to see. So now let's go down to political affiliation. So what we're looking at here, for Republican, we had 34.10% did face-to-face versus the 40.35 for online. All right, well, that's a 6, so that's kind of getting a little bit bigger. For the Democrats, we've got 24.94 to 20. That's almost a 5% difference. But then independent, there's really no difference in the independents. So for this one, we're getting kind of closer to, it's like, well, no difference in the independents. A 5% difference here, almost a 6%, right, difference here. So, yeah, maybe. Iffy though. But something to think about here, we don't know if how people answered was related to here. It could just be that more people who are online are Republican, which doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense, but you know, it could just be purely because of the way it was collected. Those were the type of people that you got to answer. But it is worth noting that there did seem to be kind of something going on here with the Democrats, or the Republicans, and maybe a little bit with the Democrats. So now let's look at gender. So for gender, we've got 54 versus 73 for online. So yes, I would say gender is definitely impacted by whether the data was collected face-to-face or online, because here you've got females, 54%, so out of the data that was collected face-to-face, 54% were females, and for the data that was collected online, 73.54% or 59% were females. So, ouch, huge difference there. You could even look at it just going down completely. Online, you got 30.06 versus 69.94 is very similar as well, or very different as well if you were looking at just the females. But we weren't looking at just the females. We were just kind of trying to figure out here that 54 to that 73. All right, so regardless, and we don't really look at that 30 to the 69. That was just kind of something interesting to see. The big thing is, though, that 54 to 73.59, and then for men, we've got 44.62 face-to-face versus that 25.87 for online, and then other 1.37 to the 0.54. So those are the comparisons that you needed to be looking at. I hope this makes a little bit more sense. I guess that's it. If you're curious why we're not looking at the 30.06 versus that 69.94. So yes, we're comparing face-to-face versus online, but we're not interested in just the female condition. What we're interested is for face-to-face, what proportion of people who answered face-to-face were female, and comparing that to the proportion of people who answered online that were female. So that's why we're comparing across. That's why we're actually looking at those rows instead of the columns, because we don't expect the columns here. So if that's another way to think about it, if we did that 30 to the 69.94, well, we know that those aren't, well, they could be the same if they were 50-50, but we know that 30 and the 69 have to add to 100. And we're not trying to add to 100, we're just trying to see if the proportions are similar. And to try to figure out if the proportions are similar, that's why we have to look at the row count for this one, so the rows going across for this one, and the rows going across for that one. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that explains why those the first set of comparisons, why the answers are the way they are. So yes, there is definitely an issue, or not an issue, not an issue. There's definitely something going on with gender and the modality, yet is that wrong? That's not necessarily wrong. It doesn't mean that we necessarily collected our data incorrectly. What it could be telling us, if anything, is just that maybe there's more women online in the places where people were collecting data. So I think a lot of people collected data on Facebook. So maybe that just means that more women are on Facebook. Maybe that just means that there's more women on Facebook who are willing to answer surveys online. I don't think it necessarily has to do with our data being collected incorrectly. Yet, should we use gender as a way to kind of break apart the data and to see if anything's going on? Well, if anything, it kind of questions whether or not we should use gender as a way to kind of look at the rest of the data, but we will get into that later. But I hope this helped.